from the end of the season to the beginning, and San Jose State is actually the closing game. And I'm sure for both programs, they hope that they already have a bowl game clinched by then. It could be the game that UNLV needs to clinch a game. And this turned into quite a heated rivalry in terms of passion on the field. Kevin Richardson has been calling the games as the analyst on radio for a long time, played the game at Stanford, and gives us a couple of minutes to look at Brent Brennan's program. How are you, sir?
Doing great, and thanks so much for having me. I got so excited when you guys sent me a text. I mean, it means football season is here, right?
Exactly. And we had a good conversation at the Mountain West Conference Media Days with Brent Brennan, which I want to elaborate on. And let's talk about how this season sets up by going back to last season first. What kind of momentum do you think they had going into the offseason? 7-5 finish, but faded a little bit at the end by losing 3 of 4. So what did last season create moving to this season?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, if you look at where San Jose State was before the horrible tragedy of losing a team member, things were rolling along pretty well. Chevin Cordero, of course, the Hawaii transfer, dual threat quarterback, he was locked in and looking great. And, I know the bowl game wasn't really what they wanted. Eastern Michigan was just a tough, nasty team, and it was a cold day of football. I think obviously everybody there wanted to put a little better foot forward. But if I think about that transition into spring ball seemed really productive. And in two ways, I think. Chevin Cordero's second year with offensive coordinator Kevin McGibbon, and it really felt like Chevin finally really had the reins, right? Felt comfortable in, this kind of multi-look offense and saying, hey, here are the things I like, here are the things that I don't. And then the other thing that I think is going to tell you a lot about Brent Brennan and his seventh year is his defensive coordinator, Derek Odom's been there the same amount of time. And, you had to switch out almost the entire defense going into this year. So we're going to find out from a development standpoint, kind of where Brent and Coach Odom and Coach McGibbon are with the offense and defense and that kind of thing. And I think that's going to be the litmus test, if you will, for me as we get going into the fall and the early games. How good does the defense look? And if they look good, it means you've got some momentum coming out of last year, if that makes sense.
And it really is the mark of a good program. When you're recruiting at the level you want to be at, then I'm not saying it's easier to replace Kyle Harmon and Fehoko and Hall, but you have to do it if you want to stay, at least a bowl eligible team. They lost a lot in those guys. Those guys were great players and also good character guys.
Oh, for sure. And, Viliami Fehoko, it was always interesting last year because Cade Hall had been the defensive player of the year 2 years earlier, and people would always want to talk about him, and he was, a great player. But, as the year went on, you just look at Viliami going, man, this guy is a next level talent. Just, keeps getting better and better and ornerier and ornerier. And I say that affectionately. So yeah, that's a lot to replace. And so, I've really got my eye on the defense and how much does that drop? You've got some good linebackers. You named Brian Parham, who's really good, Jordan Cobbs, and then Matthew Tago. You probably remember his brother, Christian Tago, from a few years back. And he's an Oregon State transfer. And gosh, as I look at my call sheet as you go to work on this thing, this is always so challenging early in the year because, now with this transfer portal being such a real deal, man, you've got so many transfers you've got to get up to speed on and remember where you last saw this kid that you're talking about, right?
Is Cordero the best quarterback in the Mountain West Conference?
I say he is. I know, everyone who ever played a position at Boise is always the best in the conference when you get these conversations going.
Yeah.
But I really believe Chevin is. And I think the part that makes Chevin so just deadly is, I think I said it last year on your guys' show, you dial up 20 pass plays, 4 of them, he's going to pull the ball down. So it's going to ring up as you only called 16 pass plays. And on those 4 runs, he'll probably average 6 yards, 7 yards a carry, but he's going to gash you for 18 yards when you didn't, when you needed at least as a defense. He's just really got that knack of getting out of the way and not getting hit, but at the same time running the ball real effectively. And I thought, it seemed to me in fall or spring ball, and then a little bit here in fall camp, a little bit I've watched. Seems like he's got a little more on his deep ball too, and that would probably be the one place you could attack him last year and say, okay, well, this guy can't, throw it out at the end of the stadium. But that looked better to me too the other day when I was watching practice.
We talk about the excitement around the program inside the building, but where's the community in terms of this team? I know the attendance has trickled up every year over the last 5 years. I think it's up about 10% since 5 years ago. But as the community as a whole embraced what this program has done?
It's interesting, Bay Area football, where it's at. Went to a Niners practice the other day. My wife loves pro football, and we went up and watched a practice, and the practice was just packed with people. So that theory that, the Bay Area doesn't like football, I'm not sure I buy that one. For San Jose, you've seen markedly better attendance at the home games. In terms of the football community in general, I think the thing that we deal with up there is just, it's the Bay Area has just become so big, and traffic and all of those different things. So, the people that have a connection to San Jose, either they know a kid or they've got a kid playing there, or they went to San Jose State, those people are coming out. It's still, you'd still like to tip it over and get to a place where, dare I say, Fresno is, where anybody that, is within 60 miles is trying to come to that game. So it's better, not where you want to be. The East Side facility is complete this year. So that's pretty cool. That will, lead to a lot of buzz. And then ultimately, right, you keep winning, people have a tendency to show up, right?
We're talking Spartans football, San Jose State football. They're going to take on UNLV at the end of the season, a season finale. It's been pretty heated rivalry the last few years. Last year's game went south pretty quickly for UNLV, and we'll build on that in a second. You mentioned the facility on the east side of the stadium. How big is that, and what's in there? What have you seen? And I mean, let's be honest, how bad were some of the facilities? What kind of challenge did Brent Brennan have in building a football program that did not have a world-class football facility?
Right. I mean, you think about what he was doing. You had a really, really, average locker room, average training room, and, struggling to find a place where, you can get all the kids together and, number one, meet, and then number two, but probably most importantly, get them fed. And to be able to recruit the way he did with what he had was nothing short of amazing. This new facility, I haven't been in it yet. They just kicked it open right before football started. And when I dipped through there the other day, I was in a hurry. So I thought, well, I'll catch this, next week. But looking at all the, the plans and hearing all the talk about what they've got in there now, I mean, that is literally a game changer. And I think people sometimes kind of understand those facilities, especially at a place like San Jose State, where, the campus is pretty urban. And so you're looking for a place where the kids can come park, right? Get in, get some nutrition, get some study table in, go to class, come back, get some treatment, practice, eat, finish up their schoolwork, and then go home. And that's going to be just a huge, huge advantage for San Jose State. They included the soccer teams in on this facility, which, from a football standpoint, sometimes football people really push back. But if you look at kind of just the greater good of athletics, I don't think that ends up being a problem. And again, an impressive looking facility that now you're kind of proud to show the players, the locker rooms and the meeting rooms and all those things.
I mentioned the UNLV game a year ago. UNLV came in with some pretty good momentum. Marcus Arroyo looked like he was turning the program around. San Jose State knocks out Doug Brumfield, and then, frankly, the team fell apart, and it just didn't look like the backup quarterbacks were prepared. Were you surprised at the end of the season after, again, like at the beginning of the spot, we're critiquing a 7-5 season. If you had told people 10 years ago, hey, 7-5, that's not good at San Jose State. I mean, there's a reality. That was a solid season. UNLV went 5-7 and looked like it was moving forward, but the powers that be were like, you know what? We're going to move on from Arroyo. Were you surprised?
I actually was. And, there's a little bit of a bias, right? We always tell those stories, Brent Brennan was in Marcus Arroyo's wedding and vice versa and all those things. And I've met Marcus a few times. And it was just interesting, the UNLV game, just kind of how the trap door just kind of went out on them, offensively when the quarterback got hurt. And at the same time, you could see all of those things that were moving in the right direction. If anything, I was kind of going, okay, this is kind of where San Jose was a couple of years ago, and man, they're about ready to get it going. So, yeah, I would say the change really surprised me. I just look at this, the group of five football, and it's just such a scramble to get relevant and stay relevant, and all of that conference realignment and all those different things. Obviously maybe that was a decision to make a move. I just always question when you're going to make a move, you think about what Marcus likes to do on offense, four verts and throw it and do all those things. And then you make a transition to Barry Odom, and, that guy's a lot of things, but it isn't four verts and play fast, right? So you've got to kind of cycle through, a roster too, I think, to get things set up the way you want them to be. So it'll be interesting to see how things emerge. That's for sure. I think for the Rebels as they get their season underway.
Delicate balance at the beginning of the season for San Jose State. You open the stadium in the second game, get to show off that facility, the stadium completed with Oregon State, so that's going to be rowdy. But that means you have USC on the road and Oregon State. From a physicality standpoint, how do you compete in those games and make sure that you don't get beat to hell where it ruins the next couple of games?
Boy, you're telling me. I was putting together notes for the first two games. I always do that well in advance, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, okay, preseason number 14 with USC, and Heisman winner, and SC. It sounds funny to say, but struggled on defense last year and went to the transfer portal hard. And I would say if I look at the talent they brought in, they're probably not going to struggle on defense. So, yeah, you've got to keep Shevin healthy through those first two games. That's for sure. I think that obviously goes without saying, but that's a real priority. And I think, if I watch the way Shevin plays football, he's really good at not getting hit. And that's a big deal with these quarterbacks because, quarterbacks and linebackers, the linebacker is going to win. The one that scares me from a physicality standpoint is that Oregon State team coming in, for their opener. I was telling somebody the other day, remember, these guys were 10-3 last year. And if you look at their defensive coordinator, that's a guy that Brent Brennan has, a history with, much like Marcus Arroyo. They're really good friends. And, you think about Trent Bray, the defensive coordinator, he was just a tough, ornery, Oregon State quarterback, and now he's running the defense. And I think, they had some crazy number last year in terms of their ranking defensively. It was top 15, I believe, if memory serves me correct. So that one, from a physical standpoint, spooks me quite a bit because those guys will come in gunned up and ready to go. And then, you walk into this Cal Poly game, which, they're going through a transition, but they always bring a ton of fans for that matchup. And then, you flip right back around and it just doesn't get any easier. You go to Toledo. I think they were 9-10 win team last year. And then you come back on a short week and play Air Force on a Friday. At least that's at home. And then you go to Boise. So, yeah, the hurdles don't get any lower there in the first half for San Jose State.
That's the voice of Kevin Richardson. We'll close it on this one, doing a San Jose State preview. But you played your football at Stanford. We've had this discussion now for a couple of years, but now we are really close to just absolute chaos. As a Stanford guy, what do you want to see happen here with the Pac-12?
I would love to see the Pac-12 stay together. The thing that I question on the USC-UCLA move to the Big Ten, I think I said it last year when we talked about this. I understand football being a national, coast-to-coast conference, but I have read some stuff about, baseball recruits not as interested in USC and UCLA because they don't really want to go to Iowa in March and sit there for 3 rainouts. I hope they pull it together. I was really stunned that the San Diego State thing didn't move forward. Looking at their facilities and the basketball and all that stuff, it seemed right. So I hope it stays together. Stanford's got Troy Taylor in place. He's actually, I think, a pretty impressive coach once all the dust settles. But for him, he's got to get through this year with a roster that has been depleted via the transfer portal. And, you just don't catch up that fast at Stanford.
So if Utah, Arizona State, and Arizona all leave for the Big 12, which could happen, I mean, then you have a small conference now. Again, as a Stanford guy, what's the best case scenario? Are Cal and Stanford going to be independent and just wait for the Big Ten to come calling? I mean, do you see some sort of super West conference where it's a lot of Mountain West teams and the remaining teams? I mean, is Stanford going to want to, be in the same conference as UNLV and New Mexico? Where are we 5 years from now?
Yeah, where are we? And the roadblock on all this is always research universities in the Pac-12, right? That's the real deal, because remember, the presidents vote on stuff, and that's what they're solely obsessed with. But I think if you had the full jailbreak, Arizona State out, like you're talking about, Utah, whatever, I think then you've got to really get to work and say, okay, well, gosh, doesn't UNLV and San Diego State, all those schools you mentioned, you've got to put it together. The problematic thing for Stanford is the 34 sports, right? There's so much on all of those other sports that are really important to that community, that they have to be real thoughtful with what they're doing there. Do we have the tennis conference that we want to be in? And it's almost a rig game for Stanford, because, half of the girls that are playing tennis at Stanford have played, juniors tennis and were, ranked 1 and 2 in the world. So you've got to make sure that's right. So yeah, it's a problem. And boy, I tell you, it doesn't look like it's getting any better anytime soon. Kind of wild. And, the Colorado move, that's an interesting one to me, because okay, great, you've moved, but you still got to get yourself to a place where you're relevant. And I was kind of a fan of this, Coach Prime coming in and doing what he was doing, but at the same time, if you're turning over 50, 60, 70 players, there's just not enough talent out there to turn them over for better players. At some point, you have to develop. So it doesn't matter if you're in the Big 12 or the Pac-12. You've got to make players better so you can win games.
I agree. Last minute, Adam, go ahead.
The report today about Cal and Stanford joining Oregon and Washington and UCLA and USC, isn't that just the end game of solving all the other sports? They just play each other in the minor sports and then have football and basketball in the Big Ten. Isn't that the path they're probably exploring at this point?
I would think, right? But the part I never pick up on any of this stuff is any of the outreach from the Big Ten, right? Is the offer actually on, the table? And again, ultimately, I mean, I always think about these road trips. I mean, I'm looking at this Toledo game for San Jose and going, man, that's just not fun with a, 5:00 kickoff Toledo time, right? Yeah. So, when you look at that Big Ten, I mean, it's not like a kid goes to UCLA going, man, I hope I can go play some college baseball in New Jersey in March, So I don't think it's going to be as fun as you think it's going to be outside of football. I get how you can make a conference like that work from a football standpoint. The rest